just yesterday, University of Southampton, the researchers had some great news whereby they'd actually worked out why or how the virus was getting into the human body undetected. And we're already aware, and indeed I believe Tom was pointing out, the vulnerability from ACE2 and the fact that a number of spikes, the coronavirus, when we look at it, has these crowns, if you like, that or spikes which look like crowns that it uses to attach onto ACE2 inside the body and then replicate there. However, the glycans, or the sugars it's coated in, are not as heavily protected as certain viruses such as HIV, according to the researchers at the University of Southampton. They've used 3D modeling, and therefore the research they've done will hopefully enable us to accelerate getting a vaccine. This is actually the output of their work, showing the detailed modeling from a 3D perspective of the virus. So coming back to ACE2 for a second, ACE2, if you want to know more about it, is actually on Wikipedia. This is what it looks like. And here you can see how SARS-CoV-2, with these crowns, attaches onto it, basically to get into the human body and start replicating. So again, we've been learning quite a lot about this disease in a short period of time. And as Tom pointed out, this is the entry receptor. This is the vulnerability in the human body for SARS-CoV-2, or the COVID-19 disease as it's known. Again, we can see comparisons with SARS and CoV versus SARS-CoV-2. A lot of research going on to that to see what we can learn and transfer across. The applications of AI that relate to COVID-19 include drug discovery, which has been very well documented, the application of deep learning models both to de novo novel compounds, new drugs, and also repurposing. There are quite a few companies, many of you follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter will have seen the article on EVQLV. In silico medicine are well known out there working on this field, Excentia, Gero, Helix, many others. Some personal friends of mine who found 3 substances who I know who are also researching in this field that may have therapeutic effect, fingers crossed, and hopefully we can take that forwards as well. The other area, medical imaging with deep neural networks, and we'll come on to that, both in terms of checking people's lungs, but also on the drug discovery side, text mining, which Tom has already gone into, so I won't cover much on, but again, going through vast amount, not only EHRs, but vast amounts of medical research documents that are out there. So a month ago, there were 26,000 papers on this field, and searching through them, finding the salient points to help researchers try and create a vaccine or an antiviral drug. Prediction with machine learning forecasting, trying to work out where the disease is spreading, trying to help flatten that curve, alert policymakers and health workers to target where the disease is, and things like IBM Summit, although that's not strictly AI, it's a supercomputer, but it does work in conjunction with AI, which was very fast in modeling the genetic makeup of the COVID-19 and or the virus and helping us understand it. So DeepMind, for example, used their AlphaFold coding to model the virus, and they've made that available open source on their website, so you can search that and get more information on that if you want to learn more. That's great that Google DeepMind have done that. Now, when we take a step back, those of you who are on the cybersecurity session will remember when we talk about AI. Let's do a very quick recap before we move on. AI is, I tend to use it as the umbrella term that catches machine learning and deep learning. Of course, not everything that is AI is machine learning or deep learning, but machine learning and deep learning are subsets of AI. And machine learning is the application of statistical methods to enable computer systems to learn from the data towards an end goal. Deep learning refers to the field of neural networks with several hidden layers. It is in itself a subset of machine learning. And machine learning and deep learning is really where the action happens in terms of AI in the real world today and in this area of healthcare and fighting COVID-19. The large amounts of data that we need to process in drug discovery often mean that we're using deep learning, deep reinforcement learning models, and areas of deep learning such as GANs, who had a bad press from fake, deep fakes, etc., but are actually very helpful here in this field of drug discovery. This just gives a very high level overview, again, of the areas of AI in healthcare, drug discovery, medical imaging, EHR, which Tom pointed out before, robotic surgery and clinical trials. Now, what is the problem with getting a new drug? Why does it? Well, we can see here in this chart that in actual fact, there's a huge search space. There are believed to be somewhere between 10 to the 60 to 10 to the 200 molecules out there, small molecules. And getting through those in the lab may cost between $1,000 to $10,000 in the wet lab to go and process, etc., and put together. And the average cost of producing a drug, according to the industry, and this is the average, is estimated about $2.6 billion. And most don't make it. The failure rate is very high, less than 12% go all the way through. And it's a very time-consuming process, 7 to 12 years. And we don't really want that here, do we? Now, to get a solution for COVID-19. Now, in actual fact, 33% of the pain point, according to those in the industry, is at this early stage here on the left-hand side, preclinical. And this is where deep learning, AI deep learning, can really help speed up the process and reduce that time lag. So why do we use deep learning? Because some people argue, compared to some of the older algorithms, well, as Andrew Enge pointed out, when you get to larger amounts of data, deep learning really does well, and in particular in areas like computer vision, for example. Now here we go back 10 to 60, 10 to the 200, huge amounts of data, right? So, and of course, using GPUs, graphical processing units, etc., really helps accelerate things. IBM Summit, as mentioned, a supercomputer, have studied 77 small molecule drug potential compounds to fight COVID-19. And you can see here the statistics are huge, 200 quadrillion calculations per second. Now, the process of drug discovery involves molecular docking. I won't say too much, we could spend hours talking about this, but not all molecules dock together. And when they do, they may be toxic for humans. So you have to find molecules that will successfully dock and also won't be toxic. There's a lot of research, again, you can read some of these papers, I've given the names here, which go into a lot of detail about molecular docking and the processes and the role of AI and statistics in that. This is actually the output. This is a drug discovery model that a team that I work with actually built for the pharma sector, and it shows the output. So this is actually doing molecular docking. It's actually creating new compounds for drug discovery. It's our model. And the IC50 here actually shows the regression testing for toxicity to humans of these compounds. So you create novel compounds and then test them for toxicity to humans. And you can dramatically reduce the costs and time for getting a new drug to market. So this is a key area where AI is being deployed in the fight against COVID-19. Now, some skeptics from the traditional side, does AI really work in this field? Does deep learning really work? Does it really create new drugs? Well, don't forget, 20th of February this year, MIT CSEL identified a new antibiotic using deep learning, which could fight antibiotic-resistant drugs. So that article was out there. So it does show that this field really does work. GANs, if you remember the deep fakes and the two competing neural networks, one discriminator, one generator, because we're short on time, I won't talk a lot about this, but I did in the last session. And a deep fakes gets a bad press. But in actual fact, here, this is in silico medicine, who I mentioned before. They're using GANs and deep reinforcement learning, and in actual fact, they're to dramatically accelerate the drug discovery process. So again, this is available out there in open source. You can find it if you wish to search for it. I'm going to talk a little bit about CNNs, the computer vision. This looks very intimidating. The medical image comes on the left, the input image, and then the output on the right with the hidden layers in between. But in actual fact, I like this image that I used in the previous session on cybersecurity, because it's a bit less intimidating. And you have the input image coming on the left here. It's a car. It gets vectorized into numbers and then goes through each layer, going smaller and smaller as it abstracts higher level features. And on the right, outputs for a probability on a probabilistic basis, a softmax. So probabilistically, what is it being classified as? A car, a lorry, etc. And we do the same with medical imaging. Is a particular image one of a patient having COVID-19 or something different? So an example, this is a CNN that we built, my team, for medical imaging. And you can see it's got a saliency map which sits on the output layer. And what it does, this is for skin cancer and lesions. Now, number one here is obvious to the human eye. And here's what the CNN is seeing, the deep learning on the right side. But number two here is not very obvious to the human eye, and yet the CNN, the deep learning, actually catches it. So we actually outperformed the human dermatologist, who's a highly trained specialist, achieving 90% accuracy there. And you can see CNNs have been used for COVID-19, these chest x-rays. Number B here is actually COVID-19 positive, unfortunately. But you can see it's quite a complex looking model, but it's just to let you see how this actually gets used. CNNs also get used for drug discovery. This is something used by AtomNet to help for medical imaging, to check how the process is moving forwards. Now, I'll just say a little bit about federated learning as we go forwards. Federated learning is a new technique, is one that we relatively new. Google introduced it in 2017. We work with this technique. And as data privacy is a big thing with the EU and others, it's intended to enable data privacy whilst learning on the edge on devices. And one of the things we have to learn from this crisis and to prevent future pandemics is the ability to use edge computing to detect and monitor what's going on and enable personalized analytics. And that's something that federated learning is really key in. It's a kind of like a iterative process. You start with an initial model that then gets deployed onto, here, say, mobile devices, and as they learn on the individual data sets, but don't transfer that data, they just transfer the learning, which is the gradients and the weights, in effect, back to the aggregated model, which then redistributes the learning, updates the learning to everyone. And as you can see, already by 2022, it's estimated that 1.25 billion mobiles will have AI chips, or quite probably GPUs in them. So we're going to have a lot of power in those mobiles to enable AI to work on the edge. Now, another key thing that I want to point out is that in this era, and I'm not going to say too much on this because I think Emre is going to touch on this subject afterwards, but misinformation that's coming out. One of the key things that Richard, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but Richard and myself feel very passionately about is the need to deploy technology into this field for both fighting COVID-19 and as an exit strategy, getting a new drug, getting a vaccine accelerated, but also getting us out of this economic mess. And we'll look at that. But 5G is going to play a key role in that in the future. It is not dangerous. You can see here a lot of the conspiracy theories that are out here. But this, as the BBC shows, 5G is sitting here on the non-ionizing side. Non-ionizing means it doesn't affect human cells. Not only does it not cause coronavirus, which is nonsensical, but it is not dangerous to human cells. And in actual fact, many of those putting conspiracy theories out may be in actual fact sitting in the sunshine in the parks, or the beaches, even though they're not meant to in this lockdown, exposing themselves to ultraviolet light, which is ionizing, and then going on to Twitter and Facebook, slamming 5G, saying it's causing coronavirus, when they've been exposing themselves to high-frequency radiation in the sun. So, we need common sense. 5G is going to play a key role in updating our technologies, enabling personalized medicine to come out there by scaling up the IoT. For every square unit of measurement, 5G can handle 1,000 more devices than 4G. And we're already seeing during this crisis that many of us are suffering from internet connectivity, and sometimes our mobile signals are not great. 4G is maxed out. We need to go to 5G, and it's going to enable AI on the edge to really accelerate, both with lower latency, higher speed, and also greater device capacity, which we'll need for scaling up. Another key thing that we need to consider is not only are humans a victim of this COVID-19 crisis, but so too our jobs and the economy are also victims of this. And I think right now our leaders are currently fighting the fires. The fires are ventilators, ICU beds, social distancing measures, getting PPE to hospitals, making sure that medical staff are ready, etc., getting the treatments out there. But in that fog, or rather even smoke that is coming out of the fire, our leaders are a bit lost, our political leaders. And they need to think about the exit strategies. And the exit strategies are twofold. One, work with the AI community who are working in this area, AI and biotech community, to accelerate treatments for antiviral drugs and vaccines as quick as possible, incentivize it, work internationally. COVID-19 doesn't see borders. share the data, make sure that we work collaboratively to make a treatment available for everyone as quick as possible. The other thing is work strategically to get an economic plan to get us out of this. The consumer has taken a big hit. The consumer has taken a big hit, the individual person. This is not going to be a consumer-led recovery. A lot of people lost their jobs, many on reduced salaries, being furloughed, etc. People aren't going to go out there and rush to spend again. It is going to take infrastructure projects to get the spending going, to create that demand and multiplier through the economy. And there has been a lot of talk about AI causing huge job losses, and yet there's a paradox that many of the companies that were early adopting AI, such as Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc., and Alibaba in China, have been the big engines of growth of employment and headcount. And it's been the companies that didn't adopt digital or AI, like the traditional retailers, who've really been suffering job losses. So the World Economic Forum went from predicting 5 million job losses by 2020, and ironically, it wasn't AI that brought the job losses. Our economies were pretty much high levels of employment. You can argue about the quality of the jobs, but there are high levels of employment early this year until COVID-19 came. And the crisis came from COVID-19, not artificial general intelligence, which is decades away. C-3PO is not going to come out and take away our jobs and kill us this decade, whereas pandemics can, and as we can see, are doing right now. So AI can actually be used as a means to try and help create jobs. And in actual fact, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, forecasts that 195 million jobs are at risk because of COVID-19. We really need our leaders to make strategic plans to get us out of this, both in terms of tackling the underlying issue, which is getting a treatment, but also finding an infrastructure plan like the 1930s, like FDR with the New Deal, to create a way to get us out and create a new clean system that is going to be sustainable for the future. Invest in the right areas. This chart quickly just shows the rise in e-commerce and the sectors that have had the biggest falls in e-commerce. So just have a quick gloss over to show you what's going on with the consumer. Gloves here, the biggest demand, followed by bread machines, and then luggage and briefcases, the biggest losers, which tells you the travel industry, hoteliers, etc., will also be very hard hit, right? And airlines, etc. So some of those are going to go under and probably not, come back. So there could be some permanent destruction there. And indeed, one more thing here, you can tell probably some of the physical retailers are really going to get crushed. This chart is actually out of date now after figures came out today. I didn't have a chance to update it, showing that the job losses in the US are continuing. There was another very bad number out today, and it shows us the urgency in which we do need to think of ways when we get over the health crisis to also fix the economy. But the health crisis comes first. Fixing people is first, and their health, and protecting them. But we mustn't forget, EU regulation on AI could have unintended consequences. I think what the EU plan to do is a good idea, to think about privacy, etc. But it also could have unintended consequences. So I understand I'm going to have to rush. These are just charts that show, the future of IoT and edge computing and the rapid demand. 9 connected devices per person by 2025 as we get 5G out there and edge computing. The key thing is to focus the fact that we're going to need infrastructure plans. If there is anyone from the EU Commission or member states listening to this, or any members of the UK government or other governments, Canadians, etc., leaders of opposition, whatever, we need to work together to enable new technologies that are going to be cleaner, reduce pollution, create jobs through electrification, network infrastructure, etc. 5G, accelerate that, ignore all the crackpot conspiracy theories, and put IoT and AI on the edge, personalized medicine, etc. Scale that up for newer, more efficient technologies that will not only create jobs now with the construction, etc., create new business opportunities, but also mean that we're better prepared to withstand a future pandemic and less likely to get one. And I think at that point, I'm going to hand over. But one very final point, Richard. Again, the 1930s, sorry for this typo, N here. When the Spanish pandemic flu came, at the end of World War II, when the US soldiers went back to the US, they created additional demand that allowed that recession of 7 months to end. In the 30s, the recession lasted for 47 months. And it really took massive infrastructure plan by FDR, the US President Roosevelt, to get jobs. And in fact, much of the infrastructure, the US, Hoover Dam, etc., many of the roads were built at that point in time and thereafter through those programs. We need now a new infrastructure plan that's suited for the 21st century, that's going to build around the new technologies. And at this point, I'm going to hand over.